It is another episode of the Juice on the Cuse podcast. Wes Cheng alongside Brad Bierman. Thanks so much for joining us on this Wednesday, July 31st, 2024. And of course, we begin today's show with the Syracuse football team. Head coach Fran Brown and his team begins the 2024 football preseason on Thursday in what is likely the most highly anticipated Syracuse Orange football season in quite some time. Brad, what are you looking for as preseason camp starts?
Well, Wes, I'm certainly looking for this team to be cohesive in the month of August. I think it's all about getting everybody together on the same page, because I say that we've seen the athletes that have come into the program. We've seen the complete complexion of this program change with the recruiting, the level of athlete coming in, the additions to the coaching staff, and starting with Coach Fran himself and building this program from scratch. So the athletes are there on both sides of the ball and on special teams. The depth is starting to be developed. The strategy, the philosophy has been worked on for months and now will be fine-tuned. Time to bring the team together. Time to have the senior leaders, the players that represented Syracuse at ACC Kickoff last week, show the direction, take the leadership roles. And I think if that happens, Wes, I'll throw the cards on the table and good things are going to happen for Syracuse football if that starts right here now in August.
Yeah, so Brad, I think the most obvious thing I'm looking for, and I'm not going to have any particular great insight, is how the Syracuse offense looks. There was, as you mentioned, a lot of retooling in the offseason. It starts at quarterback. How has Kyle McCord worked his way in with the wide receivers and tight ends? And specifically, how does his connection with Arane Gatson look? Because this is going to be a very different style of offense, transitioning away from Jason Beck into Jeff Nixon. And we're going to get a closer look at how Syracuse is going to operate under Fran Brown. So on Thursday, the media attention will be focused on the offense. So that's the top thing I'm looking for, how LaQuinn Allen figures into this offense, which one of the wide receivers, either one of the transfers or one of the existing wide receivers is going to step up. How's Dan Villari going to fit into this offense? There's a lot of things to look for, but I am looking to see how this offense clicks under Fran Brown. And Brad, we also got a taste of Syracuse on the media front last week at ACC Kickoff. You covered that event. What were your main takeaways from that?
Well, immediately what stood out to me, this was a business trip for the Syracuse attendees. First and foremost, I mean, you really have to press Fran Brown in a conversational situation to get him to lighten up, if you will, to be happy, to smile. He's all business. He's all about winning, and he's all about winning now. And I think the other thing I really noticed, these players, and we've said this the last couple of years at the end of the Dino Babers era, they have a definitive chip on their shoulders, Wes, in my opinion, especially a guy like Justin Barron. Seeing him last week that, he came back, he had some, options, and he can see it, and he can see how important it's going to be for him to be a leader. And I think, obviously, offensively, Kyle McCord has to take and will take that role because he's done it in the past, and he's a proven commodity. And if I could, Wes, I want to add a couple things about the offense, drilling down one level. I want to see kind of a return to the great end of the Coach Mac, Coach P eras, and George DeLeon and the mad scientist and up all night figuring out these formulas, if you will, for the football on the gridiron. But you mentioned the tight ends. I really want to see these tight ends, Villari, Max Mang. They gave him number 0 for a reason this year because he's going to contribute, especially as a run blocker. I mean, he's 6'7", almost 270 pounds. So Villari, Gatson, of course, and then the transfer receivers and the talent back, along with, as you mentioned, Allen and Willis and company in the backfield. Let's see running between the tackles, a lot of play action using the tight ends for both receiving and more importantly, blocking. And then let's see a lot of passes down the field to really stretch the field with McCord. I thought it was kind of funny, Wes, when I saw the first sample play on the new EA Sport 24 college football. Well, I think it's what we'd expect. A pass over the middle of Gatson, he's running, 35 yards for a touchdown against Ohio U. That's what we want to see. And defensively, same, a return to where hard-hitting, that the front four will be putting a lot of pressure, and then run defense will be very stiff. And then let's see how the secondary does And then special teams have been, good. They're good in the dome era, and I think that will continue.
Yeah, so Brad, there was an interesting story about Gatson. We've talked about him a lot, and rightfully so. And he was saying that he was considering leaving in the offseason, but wanted to give Fran Brown an audience. So he tells Fran Brown straight up, the only way he was going to stay at Syracuse is if he landed a top flight quarterback. So Fran Brown goes out and gets a guy who's, a former 4-star recruit that threw for 3,170 yards and 24 touchdowns with the Buckeyes, and Kyle McCord. So that really shows that Fran Brown really has his finger on the pulse of the team and knew what levers to pull to keep Syracuse's best talent in Central New York. And there was a great story about how Kyle McCord ended up in Syracuse in the first place. They asked Fran Brown, how did you make that happen? And Fran Brown kind of smiles toward the camera and says, my wife. And it was true. He worked the familial connection with Kyle McCord, and that's how McCord ends up in New York. So it's not just Fran Brown, one guy that's doing it. It's his whole family. It's the staff he's hired. So I think that was another main takeaway that I had, is how he put together this roster and how he really leaned on every single one of his connections to get the roster the way it is. And again, I mentioned this before, and I'll say it again. This is one of the easiest schedules that Syracuse has had in a while. There's an opportunity, if things come together the way that we think they are going to, that Syracuse could get 8, 9, 10 wins. This is a team that has the setup. Again, you avoid Clemson, you avoid Florida State. Your non-conference schedule, really the hardest team you're playing is Connecticut. So you really have that opportunity there. So Fran Brown has an opportunity. I think that showed in ACC Media Day once he, again, to your point, Brad, lightened up a little bit.
Yeah, exactly, Buster. I want to say this, and I'll touch upon the schedule in a moment, but, Fran Brown is really, in a sense, there's so much reincarnation from Coach Mack in the 80s. There really is, Wes, especially when it comes to storytelling, being human, being real, being able to show a lot of emotion. And that's what recruits want. They want real. And as we know with Fran Brown, with Dart and his belief in faith, that's the added element here. So he's going to be telling a lot of stories. We want to hear more of him. He should be lightening up. And to your point on the schedule, well, yes, Syracuse avoids some of the top dogs in the ACC this year. But to me, it's coming right down to week 2. I really like how the schedule plays out. You know me, I always like to have the opening game against a lower FBS team or even an FCS team, setting up for that week 2 game, because coaches always talk about, I want to see the improvement from my team from week 1 to week 2. So you have Georgia Tech here. Now, that is going to be a tough test. Very athletic team. Bombed Syracuse and Atlanta last year. Will be a different story in the Dome this season, but I like how that schedule plays out. That will tell us a lot after the game on September 7th.
So we're going to take a quick break here. We're going to be joined by former Syracuse great Brendan Carney to talk about the upcoming season. This is the Juice on the Cuse podcast. BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for everything online sports betting. Right now, you can receive a 50% free bet of up to $250 on your first deposit to bet on anything from the Olympics to baseball to Formula One racing. BetOnline has every stat, every matchup, and even live odds and spreads while the games are being played. And when the game's over, head on over to our online casino and get in on a game of blackjack, poker, or unwind with over 150 slot games. Head to the website today to get in on the action. Use promo code BELIEVE, that's BLEAV, for your 50% free bet credit on your deposit up to $250. Bet online, the game starts here. We are back on the Juice on the Cuse podcast. Wes Cheng here with you, and we were thrilled to be joined by our great friend, former Syracuse and NFL punter, Brendan Carney. Brendan, always a pleasure. How's it going today?
Yeah, hey, Wes. Thanks for having me on. It's always great to be back with you, catching up about Syracuse football. I always say it's either I'm in a really good mood or a really bad mood. Bad is when the season's over, and good is when it's the season's getting ready, and I'm starting to feel it.
Well, let's see if we can keep you in that good mood all throughout the season. So, Brendan, I was just saying before the show, you looks like you could come in and punt 70 yards right now. You've been coming on the show for almost a decade now. Given all the coaching changes, the personnel moves in the offseason, have you ever been more excited for a start of the season since you became an alum?
Yeah, no, probably not, to be honest with you. Although I was pretty excited about Dino when they hired him in 2016. I remember Rick Neuheisel, saying it was the best hire, of the offseason that year. But I think this is a different hire. Self-admittedly, when Fran was hired, I remember reaching out to a few former players, buddies of mine, and asking, like, who is this guy? And, he's never been a coordinator. He's never been a head coach. That's kind of the traditional path most head coaches, kind of take. So Fran's, unique in that way. And when you listen to him, immediately comes across, he knows exactly what he's doing, and he has a vision for the future of the program. He's been around some of the biggest names in football. We're talking about Kirby Smart, where he just came from at Georgia, probably, the best coach in college football today. Matt Rule in Nebraska, and Will Muschamp. So all these guys have endorsed him. So he must be doing something right, if he's earned the respect of those guys. And if you saw his first press conference, you saw how much, his family means to him. He spoke a lot about his wife and his children, how connected he is to them. And I think that helps him, recruiting, and connecting to, to the young men out there, who want to play, football at a major D1 program while also receiving, a top-notch education. Look, he's my age, which is crazy. That kind of makes me feel old, but he's someone that grew up in the Northeast during the 90s when Syracuse was a dominant program. And I feel like he really wants to get the program back, to that position. He doesn't seem to care, that Syracuse is in central New York, or how much snow it gets every winter, or maybe that it's been known as a basketball school the last 20 years. He kind of seems to be above all of that. He's been nonstop on the recruiting trail since coming on board. He's obviously, everyone knows he's brought in some big names, really opened people's eyes. Kyle McCord at Ohio State, who's a local kid in Jersey, Fadil Diggs, Jackson Meeks, and Yazid Haynes, and a lot of other guys. So he's really made a splash in the recruiting area in such a short period of time. And you're really starting to see him build out his 2025 class right now too. And that's looking really good. And I think from a community perspective, I've seen, a 180, from what we've seen in the last, 8 years. He's been out in the community a lot, trying to reignite the passion for the program. And I feel he's doing a really good job there. I think the fan base has kind of been hanging on by a thread in recent years, with the inconsistencies of, around the program. But, Fran's approach seems to be, getting the fans excited again, not only about this season, but the future of the program as well. I think I saw a couple clips of Fran on social media, one of them visiting the home of the longest season ticket holder. I mean, I just thought that was, it was really neat. I also believe he was part of like a tour throughout the upstate New York with a couple other of the head coaches, in the program, or the athletic program. So, I think he's really trying to connect with the community. And, I think that's something he's trying to pass down to his players as well, as I understand it. So, they're performing, community service as part of being in the program. And, they're really going to be able to take that, beyond football. I think he wants these guys to be contributors to their communities, as they kind of graduate and move on to the next chapters in their lives. Then he's also put, a solid staff together so far. He's come up, he's got a couple guys that he's come up in the coaching ranks with that kind of forged their own paths at some point, but Fran's kind of brought them back together. And trying to bring this program to the next level. I thought that was really cool. And obviously, I think, this is a big part of it in recent years, but the NIL game, I think he's taken that to another level as well. I don't have the inside scoop, but, I imagine that, he's got some heavy hitters right now to beef up part of that program. I don't know if that includes you, Wes, but it certainly doesn't include me. Yeah, no, it doesn't include me yet as well. But yeah, a lot of excitement, across the program and what he's been able to accomplish so far.
So you mentioned him involving the community. You mentioned him getting a lot of players involved. But I think a part of that equation as well is getting the alumni back, whether that's holding a conference call with all of you, inviting you to Syracuse for spring practice. That hasn't been true of previous administrations. So what do you think of the access you now have to the program as an alum?
Yeah. Again, it's kind of like a 180, from the last head coach. And yeah, so he's reopened the doors, to the former players, which I think is great. He made that very clear during his first press conference that he wanted us back in the building. We had a Zoom call that you just referenced with him. I think it was in like late winter or early spring. And if I'm not mistaken, there was like something like 200 former players on the call, which just really goes to show you, how appreciative, we all are of having that, kind of open door policy with Fran and the program. And he really just kind of talked to us about his vision for the program, over the next few years and kind of how he wants us to be involved, to come back to campus, to visit the program, and the players, and he took a ton of questions from us, and I'm not even joking. He spent like 2 hours with us.
Wow.
For someone who was just starting off and such a big job to do that, I think really meant, a lot to us former players. I know a handful of guys that went back for either, one of the spring practices or even the spring game. So there's big text chains going on. So pictures are flying back and forth of like, guys that, I haven't seen in about 20 years or so, all hanging out at the complex. And it's just really cool to see, guys go back and reconnect with each other. Brought back a lot of memories of, being up there as a player. Unfortunately I wasn't able to make it up there this spring, but, I'll be getting up there this fall, for sure. In fact, been talking to a few guys that I played with about trying to organize a weekend this fall to celebrate the 2004 Big East championship team. And the guys that were a part of that, and the athletic, been in touch with the athletic program, and they're on board and they want to help, and I don't think that's something that, we really felt, with the last regime. I just think Fran understands how beneficial it is to have, that bridge between the former players, and the current program.
So we were talking about this in the first question that you had, but you mentioned some of the great assistant coaches he's brought in: Elijah Robinson, Nick Williams, the offensive coordinator, Jeff Nixon. But as we always discuss, and you always mention, there are 3 phases of the game. He also brought in special teams coach James Volono. So he comes in with a great record, but as a former special teams guy yourself, what do you think of him? Yeah,
I mean, probably one of the few guys that loves punting on 4th down. But so I'm actually, I'm not too familiar with Coach Volono. But again, with the whole Fran theme, like I know he's a young guy, and just kind of looking at his resume, he's been at some, where he's had some solid experience, throughout his 20-year career. And being young, I kind of expect him to bring like a fresh new, look to, to the special teams unit, so, I just hope we kind of see some of our top guys on offense and defense, contributing as much as they can, and also giving some of the backups a shot at playing, and showing why they're a part of the program. I know Jack Stonehouse is back, probably the top punter in the ACC this year, and probably one of the top punters in the country. And he'll be on all the preseason awards lists, if they haven't already come out. But looking forward to seeing him perform, and be a weapon for the team. And you're going to have to forgive me. I'm not sure if we have a starting kicker up to this point. If not, I think there's a couple guys, maybe 2 guys on the roster who will be going for that job. And that's always good, obviously, to have that competition during camp. So hopefully they put those guys in some, stressful, chaotic situations, to properly test them for the season.
And Brendan, we'll get you out of here on this one. I ask you this question every year, and certainly during the preseason. So Syracuse was picked 12th in the ACC poll that came out today in the new, I can't believe I'm saying this, but the new 17-team league that includes Cal, Stanford, and SMU. What is your prediction for a win total this season, given their lighter non-conference schedule and the fact that they avoid FSU and Clemson?
Yeah, it is crazy. I know in the past we've kind of talked about this expansion and kind of where it's all going, and you almost need like a PhD to kind of fully understand it all. But yeah, look, I mean, I think I'm really excited like that guys like Marlo Wax, Justin Barron, and OG, stuck around to be a part of year one in the franchise. Obviously they could have left, gone on, probably have had successful NFL careers, but clearly saw something in Fran. Something special in him, and wanted to return. And some of the guys he was able to get through the portal, like Haynes, Diggs, and Meeks, and McCord. So super excited about those guys. I can't wait to see LaQuint Allen running the ball again this year. I love the way that guy plays. I know Willis will be, maybe working with him in parallel a little bit. He's a little bit of a different type of back, but he's going to be good. He has a bright future here. Obviously, the O-line has kind of always been a concern. So I'm excited to see kind of how they progress over the course of the season. Defensively, he brought in Coach Robinson from Texas A&M. I think that's a huge get for the program. So I'm excited to see kind of what he has in store for those guys. But, to talk about the schedule, I think it really plays in our favor. I like how we have an ACC game in week 2 against Georgia Tech at the Dome. That's kind of a revenge game, after that loss to them at their place last year. And you kind of, as you kind of look through it, I think there's a strong chance to get to 5-0, heading into NC State, which will be a tough game for us. I know the ACC will be strong across the board this year. But I don't see anyone, on the schedule, right? As you mentioned, Clemson and FSU are not on there, but on the schedule outside of like an NC State and Miami, that really scare me. So I think the key, like in past years is, how healthy can we remain in the back half of the season? If we can avoid major injuries and kind of get through October, and into early November and be healthy going into Miami, I definitely see a path for us to get to 8 wins. So that's my prediction is we're going to get 8 wins in Fran's first year.
It's a great prediction. We'll see if it comes true. Brendan, we always appreciate your time again. Syracuse legend, former Syracuse punter and NFL punter, Brendan Carney. We appreciate the time. We'll catch up with you soon.
Yeah, Wes, thanks for having me, and go Orange.
We are back on the Juice on the Cuse podcast from the Rivals and Believe networks with my longtime colleague, Wes Cheng. I'm Brad Bierman. And Wes, I want to shift a little bit over now to a sport that's warm in our hearts each winter in the Cuse, and that, of course, is SU Hoops and Adrian Autry's second season. And as does happen this time of the summer, the out-of-conference schedule starts to take shape, and kind of interesting to see what Coach Autry and his staff are putting together, because as of now, all but one of the out-of-conference games have been set. And, of course, the ACC conference games will be released in September. But looking at it so far, Wes, I like how the schedule's developing, because you have your usual upstate New York teams, Albany, Colgate, and Cornell. Albany has not officially been announced yet, but it is going to be on the schedule. And then you have the traditional game against Georgetown this year in the Dome. And then the other games in Syracuse South, i.e. New York City, in this case, the Barclays Center in Brooklyn. And good competition with the Legends Classic, St. Joe's, Texas, Texas Tech, 2 of those 3 teams. And then Maryland also in Brooklyn a month later. Like how it's shaping up. It's going to be really important for this team to develop, obviously, in the months of November and December to get ready for what's going to be a very rigorous ACC schedule again this year.
Yeah, Brad, I have that game against Maryland at the Barclays Center circled on the calendar because I think that's going to be a really important barometer for where the team's at. You mentioned you play a bunch of the mid-majors in the upstate New York area. That game against a high-major opponent, Kevin Willard, no stranger to Syracuse, especially during his time in the Big East. So I really do think that that's going to be an important matchup and one that's going to tell us how Syracuse is going to develop as the season goes on. And Brad, wanted to close out on a recruiting note. So the July dead period has ended, and Syracuse was able to host several key recruits on campus over the weekend. I'm going to focus on 4-star defensive back Aiden Pouncey out of Florida. So he was on the SU campus this weekend. Syracuse got to make their best pitch to the Rivals 250 athlete. He tells the Juice Online that after the Syracuse visit, he is, quote, And he put Syracuse, quote, definitely a top school, if not the top school, end quote. That's a pretty good quote to come out of a Rivals 250 player. He also said that he enjoyed being around the staff and the players. And the trip was highlighted by getting to know head coach Fran Brown better. So, Brad, overall, a great start to the recruiting season. The Orange trying to add to their 2026 class, which is already ranked 12th in the country by Rivals.
I was just going to say, Wes, what's the lid on this program in recruiting rankings? I'm just really looking forward to the day where Syracuse, and I think it's going to happen pretty soon, is a definitive cracking in the top 25 almost on a regular basis.
I think that you're right, Brad, not too far in the distant future. And that's it for us. For Brad Bierman, this is Wes Cheng. You've been listening to the Juice on the Cuse podcast presented by Believe in Rivals, and we will see you next time.